Will you please stand for the flag salute? And Director Winskill, you can start us, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. We have two major items tonight. You can see we have wonderful boards up showing us progress on some of our projects, and we have two that we're going to talk about tonight. Lyon Elementary, the conceptual design for that, and Browns Point Elementary conceptual design. Dr. Garcia, who do you want to have lead this off? Mr. Swansky or Mr. Murakami?
We're gonna turn it over to the team.
Okay.
But just real quickly, tonight's that opportunity for you on both projects as board members to give us some guidance. Are there any fatal flaws with our conceptual design? Is this this would be that moment where we have to say to ourselves, we're on the right track and there's still plenty of opportunity to do tweaks, but if we're so far off, then we need that guidance from you tonight in there. So as you're listening and engaging with the team, please feel free to ask any kind of clarifying questions or any thoughts that you may have that you'd like to see. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Murakami, who's going to introduce his team and lead us through the discussion.
Thank you, Deputy Superintendent Garcia. Board President Vial and members of the board, it's our pleasure to be here tonight to show you where we are on two of our latest elementary school design projects. I wanted to take an opportunity. I've put an 11x17 document in front of you all as a reminder of the process we take on a typical construction project. The graphic basically shows the items that we come to you periodically for updates, and then the items that are a little more formal and require board action. And so starting at the top with architectural selection, we come back to you with a recommendation to enter into contract with an architect. We then work through the preliminary designs, and we'll come back to you for approvals such as GCCM, if applicable, or some of the OSPI requirements. You probably have seen these in the past and recall that will come for different resolutions for value engineering and constructability. This is one of the first ones on the left that we come to you that's informal. This is that opportunity, as Dr. Garcia mentioned, that there's course correction opportunities for you guys to chime in on the progress we're making. I recall comments Director Hines from years ago about wanting opportunities to see things in progress so that you guys get an opportunity to see the work and be able to comment and help steer the vision. And then we go through.
And we have done that in the case of Sammy.
Oh, yes.
And we do appreciate that. No more
Yes,
chicken
very much
coops
so.
on hills, yeah.
No, and we appreciate it. We really do.
I know, thank you.
So
I
these
just-
are great opportunities. So we have before you tonight, as you mentioned, Lyon and Browns Point, but we also put kind of in our stadium bowl here updates of all the other construction projects. And so we're hoping we can do a little bit of a walk later. So if you guys have any questions, this is the process that we've been working through the last 4 years with our Prop 1 bond measure, and we'll continue unless we hear otherwise, or if there's ideas that you guys would like to see different opportunities for. So with that, I'm going to turn us over to Director of Planning and Construction, Rob Swansky, to introduce the team and get the presentation started.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the opportunity to share our updates on current projects and also these two new projects that we're working on. And so I wanted to introduce to my left Brian Ho from TCF Architecture and Brian Fitzgerald from TCF. They are working on the Browns Point project currently. And then further to my left, I've got Jeremy Theodore with Dowa IBI Group, Dick Withacombe, who consults with Dowa, and also Steve Olson. And then further to my left is Anita. Thanks for coming, Anita, principal at Lyon. And so I also wanted to say thank you to those of you who were able to come on our tours of Stewart and McCarver. And I just wanted to pause for a moment and see if there was any question or any comment that came out of that from our board members or cabinet members.
I just have one question. That was about Stewart. So I was talking to someone about that who used to teach at that school. So the theater, what is that going to be when it's not a theater? Is it a commons area?
We like to call it a cafetorium.
Is that where they're going to eat?
So it will be when there's going to be telescoping seating that comes down into there to create the auditorium opportunity, but when that retracts and gets out of the way, it will be cafeteria. And then up above, there'll be a student commons, and then adjacent to that, a library that's enclosed. And so it's multi-use spaces, multi-functionality.
Okay, I was thinking it was closer to on the other side by where the kitchen was. I just was a little confused, but
Sure.
okay.
Sure.
It looks good though.
Great, thank you. Awesome. Just a reminder that Wilson and Wainwright are having tours on May 9th at 4:30, so if you can come, we'd love to have you to show you those projects. And I wanted to say there will be no golf clubs tonight. I thought about bringing them from October, but I thought better of it, so no golf clubs tonight. So I'm going to try to go really quickly, which is difficult for me, and I've asked the team to be concise tonight. We're trying to keep it to an hour. We want to make sure that you get the design status update, but we're coming to the end right now of conceptual design, trying to get to you early for the course corrections if needed. And one of the things we know about a presentation, I've said to folks lately, we need to be modeling what we're talking about when we say it's not just always stand and deliver. We know that in a classroom setting, engaging learning environments for kids are all kinds of different delivery. And so tonight, we'd like to be conversational. Now, that can be dangerous because your presentation can be out the window, but I use this analogy. I said, you know, if you teach the best lesson you've ever taught as a teacher and the kids fail the test, did it really matter what you taught? Not really. It mattered what they learned. And so we're more concerned with your thoughts tonight. We have a whole bunch of stuff to present. If we don't get to it all, this presentation will be available to you as well, and we can continue the conversation again. But please feel free to interrupt or ask questions, and for clarifications, we want to do that. And so our objectives tonight, we want to continue the conversation from our October board study session. We want to walk away with a shared understanding of the design direction across projects. We also want to have a clear understanding of the design process, have you have a clear understanding of the design process so far with Browns Point and Mary Lyon, and then of course answer any questions that you may have. And I'm trying to advance two different things at the same time. I have to remember that. So continuing the conversation, when we met in October, we reviewed the Arlington design. We had Malum here, and they took you through a hands-on activity and a PowerPoint. You had a chance to see what that was like. We also looked at innovation from the past, and many innovations across Tacoma, and Arlington being an iterative step in that innovation. And then we also talked about best instructional practice driving the new innovation and flexible, agile designs. And then also talking about our visioning process to drive future design. And so we talked about, as in the in the past, how there have been many conversations about what teaching and learning looks like in this next generation and how we wrap that in the building. And so I've divided tonight into three buckets. The first bucket being the visioning, which I wanted to go over quickly again. The second being our process to date. And the third one being the design status. And if we hit 6:40 and we're not to design status, we're going to get to design status as best we can. So visioning. You may recognize this graphic, and it really talks about the values that we have talked about over the last 3 to 4 years. What are the things that make teaching and learning important? What are the best instructional practices? What do we value in the educational setting? We've talked about relationships. We've talked about teaching methodologies, and so have come up with 5 with architects and designers and teachers and administrators and students. And part of the visioning book, which was this document here, has these images in it, and it continues to be what we come back to all the time as we're talking with our design advisory committees about how to put these schools together. So
just real quickly,
yes.
Just for those that are watching at home and stuff, that book is also online, as well as all the bond information and all the projects and updates through our Building Through Achievement website. And so if you have interest in learning more about this pieces as we quickly glance through there, that's always available to you online.
So in that graphic, you'll see the words think, discover, impart, create, and exchange. And so when we talk about the spaces in the built environment, we're looking at what does a space look like where you would impart knowledge? And this shows you, and we're going to come back to some of these images later in the presentation, but this starts to show you what are those spaces looking like where you would impart knowledge? What do the spaces look like where you create space for kids to think? What about spaces to discover? The hands-on learning. What about places to create? In the past, we've looked at maker spaces and things we've called Da Vinci labs. So what are we doing to create spaces for creation? And then what do the spaces look like when kids want to exchange information? So I wanted to put up this next slide and start to have this conversation. So Jeremy, I'm going to ask you, so this slide about next generation learners, we went away from the phrase 21st century learning because we're already 16 years into the 21st century. So we thought maybe it was time to change what we call the learners today, and we're calling them next generation learners. And so we are talking about kids that are different than when we went to school. And so Jeremy, what are some comments you might make about next generation learners?
Well, as you see on the slide, I guess we're just trying to call out characteristics of next generation learners here.
Can you speak into the microphone? Thank you.
Excuse me. So the average American attention span is 8 seconds now. It's getting shorter. How do we keep kids' attention? 81% of all kids are using some sort of online media. How do we address that and provide educational information in a fun and interesting way? There's a lot of poverty and social unrest, and how do we address that in our teaching environments as well? And kids are, in another sense, kids are more entrepreneurial today. 76% of Generation Z kids are looking for a way to create their own business as opposed to just getting through college, for example. So these are some of the characteristics that we're looking at as we design these next generation spaces.
Great, thank you. Mr. Fitzgerald, any comment about next generation learners?
I think the main thing for us as architects, as we look at these factors, is how do we embrace that, and how do we design schools differently than we have? We know that the old bells and cells we've been building for many years should be a thing of the past. We need to be looking at how we design our schools differently, and these are the characteristics we need to be thinking about when we're doing that.
So as we think about next generation learners, we start looking at the next generation applications. And so some buzzwords that are out there, you may have heard the term flipped classroom. So instead of a teacher speaking about a topic from the front, they may direct a student to a video to watch at home. So when they come into class, the time can be more interactive and go deeper into the learning. And so project-based learning, maker spaces, we've used that terminology, learning through play, self-directed learning. One of the things that came out of our visioning document was how do we build schools that are student-centered? I loved Christy Berry's example at Washington where in the maker space there, the sink was not at adult height, it was at kid height, which makes sense. That's a student-centered approach to creating that space. And then some next generation learning examples. Some of you have gone on tours. I'm showing up here Rosa Parks School, the Gladstone Center for Children and Families in Trillium Creek. These are just some examples of many where buildings are looking different to support a different type of learner. And I might even tie it back to McCarver. If you had a chance to visit McCarver, even though we had limitations in that space because it's a historical remodel, there are still places for 1, for 5, for 10, for 50. And so even in the traditional buildings, you can create those spaces that give teachers more opportunity to do flexible grouping, peer tutoring, and all of the other best instructional practices that we know work well for kids. So I thought it would be important quickly to go in and tie the 5 dimensions of teaching and learning because it's what we've adopted as our instructional framework in Tacoma, and just show you a couple that I feel we're supporting. And so one is that student engagement. So when we talk about natural daylighting and flexible furnishings and flexible audio-visual, these are all things that create an opportunity for kids to be more engaged in the learning process. And so with that, you've been sitting for a while, please stand up.
I'm not going to.
this is going to be hard for me because I won't be able to keep the mic. But I want you to do something. I'll try to talk loud so the mic still picks me up. If you can stand on one foot, please try. And then I want you to do this. And then I want you to do this.
Oh, geez, here we go.
Now I want you to change feet, change hands. There is method to this madness. Okay, you may sit down.
I have two.
So, I had to do something. There were no golf clubs tonight. There's method to that madness. You know, I guess I have a question. What's the most comfortable position to sit in during a meeting? What's the most comfortable position? It's the next one.
Mhm.
And I say that because we're made to move. We're not made to be static beings. There's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Dieter Bredeker, who's a famous ergonomist out of Germany, works for the German government, and he preaches the gospel of ergonomics and movement and brain development in children. And so why move? Why should we be creating opportunities for kids to move? This graph shows you that over the years, kids have moved less and they've been sitting more. And I think we look at
Mr.
childhood.
Swansky,
Yes.
our PowerPoint's not matching yours. Just so you know, we're flipping around on over here on our screens. Not sure what's going on.
I created hyperlinks, and so.
I mean,
So those slides are in your PowerPoint, but far to the back. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
these are further in the back. So what I tried to do is, in an attempt to make it more conversational, I created hyperlinks that jump around in the PowerPoint. So,
Oh, I got it.
my apologies.
So maybe for the essence, if you've lost track, we can watch on the big screens. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
stuff.
that's
Sure,
fine, that'll
and we'll
work,
get back on
but
track in a
Do
moment.
me
I
a favor
I
next
jumped.
time, for those of us that are older that aren't that
Sorry.
tech savvy, please do it in sequencing or and it's a little bit easier.
Certainly.
It wasn't age-related.
Well, I'm glad. Catherine says it's not age-related. I appreciate that.
I
but-
apologize.
Okay,
That's my
thank you.
fault.
Thank you.
So the graph you're seeing on the screen, it shows, starting I believe in 1940 on through 2020, how movement in children has decreased and sitting and static activities have increased. Thinking about video games and all the other things that are more static, I think we know that that's true. So what about furnishings in a classroom that can move? Another graph that shows when kids given an opportunity to move over time, their attention actually increases versus a static, rigid seat where their attention decreases over time. So we're trying to allow for those movements in classrooms too, so that kids have better focus, better attention, a better engaging learning experience overall. I need to go back. Okay, so this will get us back on track just about. The second D that I wanted to look at was classroom environment and culture. And really all to say here is that any wall, any space, any activity, anybody can happen in so many of the different spaces that we're creating in these new projects. And so that underscores the need for classroom environments and changing of culture so that it's not always stand and deliver, that there's more opportunity to do different best instructional practice. This will now take us back to the process. So please keep in mind a couple of things tonight. That projects, both Mary Lyon and Browns Point, are on parallel paths, but they are in slightly different stages of design. And so you could see some more developed, some less developed, but still on the same parallel path. Two completely different sites and varying needs at each building, unique to the community, the students, and the staff. So these aren't cookie-cutter schools, but there are similarities in thought. And the reason I overwhelmed you with boards tonight is if we have a chance after, it is kind of like Stadium Bowl. I'd like you to take a look and we can talk about how there are similarities across our designs, collaborative learning areas, core learning, classrooms, small group, etc. And then I wanted you to know also that we've taken the different design firms, NAC Architecture, who's working on Wilson, Malum, who's working on Arlington, TCF on Browns Point, Dowa IBI Group with Erickson McGovern working on Mary Lyon, and they have done peer review of each other's design. And the point of that was to make sure that we were leveraging resources across our projects and creating this cross-pollination of the best thinking that we could get and bring all our schools to functionally a new level. I'm going to quickly go on this slide and just say that we're creating spaces of different sizes. to accommodate 1, 5, 10, 15, 50 plus kids. And in each of those spaces, we're always looking at things like the services. What kind of audio communication is there? What about the furnitures, the fixtures, and the equipment, the access and visibility, the other considerations and adjacencies? So how do the small areas in a school get sprinkled throughout the school so that all of these spaces are available to everybody?
I'd like to add that in the upper left-hand corner, just for an example, where it says small group and it's a little box measuring 150 square feet. In our old way of thinking, we would have designed a custodial closet at 150 square feet or a storage room at 150 square feet. And you lock it into that use for a long time until you have capital funds to change it. The vision now is, let's put those 150 square foot boxes in the school, but let's make sure they have a ceiling and they have daylighting and they have power and data, so that if it starts and opens as a storage room, in 5 years it could be a small breakout, it could be an office, it could serve other functions, so that we're designing in that flexibility now for those spaces in the future, so we're not locked into single uses.
So we are going to be using some terminology tonight, and thought it would be important to explain that. We're going to use the word neighborhood, learning neighborhood related to Mary Lyon, and learning suites related to Browns Point. Both the same idea, different vernacular, but I wanted to show, so I put an umbrella here to say essentially the learning suite is the umbrella over your core learning spaces, your shared learning, and your small group. So essentially creating these areas that have different flexibilities, different sizes for different groups, and those are the learning suites in the neighborhoods that we're talking about. And this came out of, and you're going to hear from our design teams, came from our staff. What they wanted to do, how they're spending their time with kids, what the best instructional practices are from what they're doing. And so I guess I'm going to start here with Browns Point and just ask a couple of questions. So hopefully we can get to each of these areas, and if not, we've kind of prioritized. But one of the important pieces was the staff. And so this is a hyperlink again, so I apologize, it's going to flip to another slide that's not in order. If you click on the word that says staff, it will take you to the proper slide. And so tell us about your interactions with the staff.
Yeah, so in our project, we've engaged the staff on a few different occasions, and of course we have staff on our design advisory committee. But as we've met with the entire staff in a couple different settings where we've had representatives from each of the different departments and grade levels. We've met with that group, the SCDM group. We've also met with the entire staff and really trying to understand from them early on what a day in the life looks like, how they interact with students, and what the activities look like when they're working in small groups, when they're working, when kids are working individually, and when they're working in large groups. And we challenge the staff to think about and give us input from the eyes of the students. You know, what do the students look for? When are they successful? What works? What doesn't? When they're in these different settings. And so early on, asked them these questions and had them get into small groups and work amongst each other and share back with us how those different settings looked. And then we could take that information and bring it back to our design process. We then have gone back to them with some of the evolution of the design process to show them the words that you told us, how those begin to transform into an actual physical space. And so we've gotten feedback from them at a number of different stages along the way.
Thank you, Brian. If you click on the blue arrow, that will take you back to this slide again. So let's talk about instructional practice related to Browns Point.
Yeah, so this was a similar exercise. We actually did this with the Design Advisory Committee, and we had 3 or 4 teachers, principal, who are on the Design Advisory Committee, and this was kind of the next step in that process of understanding what does it look like for kids during the day, and again, helping us to, we spent time in the school, we spent time going through classrooms and talking to teachers and talking to students, but this was a way for us to help try to document what does it look like when students are spending time in these different settings, again, individually, independently, small groups, large groups, but also where they are. Does it need to be in the four walls of the classroom? Can it be visible from the classroom? Is it remote from the classroom? And so the graph that you see up here, try to go through a typical day in the life, knowing that every teacher, it's different. First grade, fourth grade, different teachers, different students, different specialists throughout the day, but give us a typical day in the life. And this documented what that looked like in the different size groups they were in. And so you can see like the orange bubble is indicative of a large group. The green bubbles are indicative of independent time. How much time they were spending in each one of those different activities, and then where they were happening. And so all the way on the left, those are the activities that the teachers really felt, those are things that would need to be within the walls of the core learning or teaching space, the classroom. In the middle, those are the activities that, well, those don't have to be in the classroom, but those could be visible from, and we can let these groups kind of expand out into other areas that are shared learning areas. And then remote activities like lunch and recess and specialists, the things that happen beyond. And so as we were able to quantify how much time during the day was spent in those different activities, it helped us to frame the conversation about what the spaces should look like to support these type of activities.
And I think it's a testament to our staff that they're moving in the direction of more small group. With Arlington, I think it was about 70-30. Here it's about 50-50. So teachers are changing their practice and realizing that they're more effective with small groups and smaller teacher-student ratios. So that's a testament to the good things that they're doing. And then what about adjacencies? So let's talk about what that word means and kind of the activity you went through to talk about where things are possibly located in the school design.
You know, an activity that we went through pretty early on with the Design Advisory Committee that led to some of the diagrams that you'll see up in front on the boards here, but really trying to understand what are the important adjacencies of big program blocks of spaces. So the classrooms to the activity spaces like the gym or the commons area, the administration, the playgrounds, the connection of those spaces to other areas on the site like the drop-off. And as we allowed the team, and we kind of stood back and watched, as we allowed that Design Advisory Committee to go and start coming up with different ways to organize and to explore adjacencies between spaces, we started to see some commonalities. We started to see these relationships that between the active spaces like the gym and the playgrounds was really important. Adjacencies like classrooms to protected outdoor space that wasn't open to 51st and Browns Point Boulevard, the busy streets that were surrounding. And those important adjacencies, we kind of distilled those down into a handful of things that we took to the next level, diagrammed, and really led to the building design as you'll see it today.
Great. Thanks, Brian. We're going to jump to Mary Lyon. And the first question I have for you folks is, talk to us about the driving themes that have driven our design.
Well, I guess this is Mary Lyon's a really inspiring population, and as well as Anita's work and her staff are just doing amazing work. This is a group that, a school that houses a significant autism population and program and is very successful. About 25% English as a second language at Mary Lyon, and I believe 89%, 90% assisted lunch. So that's a general context, but beyond that, there is an extreme sort of sense of camaraderie, an integrated population, autistic kids in the general classrooms, and a sense that everyone is a language learner. We're not necessarily English as second language learners. So a great spirit as a starting point that's led to these driving themes that you see on the slide. The intent with everything that we're doing at Mary Lyon is to foster inclusivity, nurture language, promote global awareness. So these are also kids that may not see much beyond their neighborhood. And so there's a lot of concept here about offering them a view of what Puget Sound is as a way of understanding a larger geography, and then maybe, what else is out there in the world beyond, to dream big and kind of connect to the global community. Ensuring basic needs is, of course, a piece of that. Engaging the community. There's great community groups involved at Mary Lyon, from the Girl Scouts to Catherine's Place to Westminster Church doing tutoring. So you'll see some space inside the school as well that's intended to pull the community in and make this kind of the community's living room and a beacon of hope for the community. So I think that's a pretty good summary of the driving themes.
So I clicked to the community involvement screen, and I can look at the community assets as well, because you guys did a lot of work reaching out into the community, connecting yourselves there, and trying to have a clear understanding about this is the hub of the community, and so community was important to talk to. So maybe let's talk a little bit more about that.
So one of the core beliefs that we've carried on at Mary Lyon is that the more that we are supportive of our families' growth and their own personal growth towards their goals, the better our kids are going to be for that. So we've made connections for not only the social emotional support of our students, re-engaging with comprehensive life and providing space for them to do counseling, but Girl Scouting the school day, because that's not an experience our kids were having, because after school Girl Scouts is not something that's prominent in the East Side. Parents haven't had that history to know how to volunteer for that, so we've been able to have that during the school day, during lunch and recess for our girls to have. And then partnering with different other organizations like Westminster Presbyterian to do tutoring and have volunteers from them come in. But we want to continue that on with the services we do, like with Catherine's Place. We provide a space for them to have a Hispanic mothers support group of women who are survivors of abuse. And our dream is that we can provide a space where we could have English language learner classes happen, where we could have computers to access job training on site right there in our community living room, to be able to help transform their lives in a way that's going to move us all forward as a school and a community.
Thanks, Anita. Anita is an amazing principal. If you've ever had a chance to sit with her and her staff, she's awesome. And she's been highly involved in this project. So we appreciate all she's been doing on the team. Maybe I'll just bring up this around community assets, mapping really quickly, maybe just describe what you did here.
Yes, this was just an initial attempt to understand all of the assets that this neighborhood and community have. So that's from the simplest things like where do you buy your groceries to church, police, fire, other activity spaces. So all the pieces that might affect a student and their learning and their basic health on an average day, and looking at those as real assets and trying to draw as many of those into the school as possible, give them a place to be on the site as well as just out in the community.
Great, thank you. And I think the last thing we'll cover here is about students and staff. And here we go. So talk a little bit about some of the activities that you did with our staff and students.
Well, the opportunity to work with staff and students at Mary Lyon was just an exceptional experience. And Rob, you're right about Anita and the role she plays as a principal at the school, but also the wonderful collegiality that exists throughout the school community. We had several opportunities, significant opportunities, to work both with staff, but also to work with a great number of students. Day-long engagement of the entire student body with design experiences and the opportunity to construct their vision of a new elementary school that they would be excited to live in. Developing large sheets that were describing that school and having the opportunity to share it back with other students. The opportunity to go into individual classrooms created by teachers as a way to meet with and talk to students and just some extraordinary experiences with young people who were so excited about the opportunity to redesign and to begin to live in a brand new school. There are two or three things that I want to emphasize in my moment to speak that stuck for me. One is the extraordinary compassion that a number of young people showed for each other, and particularly across groups where there were significant differences between populations, and saying to us in the most compelling and compassionate way, please make sure that those other kids that we see and are part of our community are really well cared for in this design. Please be sure. And please be sure that the things that our teachers now don't have as much as they need are available to them when the school is designed and built and available. And these were third graders and fourth graders talking about their friends and their neighbors and their teachers in the most, in a sense, unimaginable and healthy way, as a byproduct of the kind of experiences that are taking place today at Mary Lyon and will only be greatly enhanced with the design of a new school.
Thank you, Dave. So I wanted to make mention before we head into the design status, and we're right on time. Good job, everybody. We've done some unusual things, none the least of which is asking our design teams to come together and critique each other's work. This doesn't happen typically in design, and it's been a great thing, and we've been tweaking the process that we call value analysis, but it's really about seeking to find the best value. Not always the lowest cost, but the best value, and how does it connect with the design, with what the vision is. And it's really neat to see the guiding principles here that have been expanded upon in both projects to relate specifically to Mary Lyon and to Browns Point, and to watch these folks work together. And so I have to thank them publicly for taking that risk and working with each other for the sake of making our projects better. So I think that's pretty cool. So thank you. So we're going to move on now with design status for Browns Point, and I'm going to turn it over to TCF.
All right, so I'll start here, and what you're going to see is we've, with Browns Point, been designing sort of in a parallel track between the kind of the fundamental interior organization of the building and the overall design. And so the first set of slides here is really about the learning suites, and this, kind of the core of where the students spend a large part of their day. And the diagrams that are up here right now are about taking the next step from that earlier bubble diagram that we showed and understanding, okay, once we see how activities are spent, the time in activities are spent throughout the day, what do the resulting spaces need to be? And we walked the Design Advisory Committee through a series of steps to say, here's what you have now, which is the upper left graphic that you see up there, which is traditionally sized classrooms, a double-loaded corridor, and one shared learning area, and really underutilized a space that they have now because they can't see who's out there. It's a relatively large space, about the size of a classroom, and so, and then walk them through a number of steps to say, how could this be different? And I won't go through all of these, but I think what we'll talk mostly about is the upper right diagram, what we called Concept C. We went through and we said what we have in the program is a number of spaces that are generically labeled: core learning, medium group, large group, small group. And if we start to take each set of classrooms, 3 to 4 classrooms that make a really nicely sized learning suite or neighborhood, as we're calling them, what are all the spaces if we start to combine those? What do they look like in that suite? So between shared and small and medium group spaces, how can we best utilize those spaces? And so in the upper right was really an exploration of saying, okay, if we start to take space from what would be traditionally called a core learning space, a classroom, 900 square feet, and pull that into a shared space, could that shared space be even more easier to use, better to use, more flexible for a group of teachers than what you have now. So go to the next slide here. What this shows is one concept of what this might look like. And so what this shows is classrooms are about 750 square feet, so a good amount smaller than what they're used to and what we see
Can
traditionally.
you give us that number again? Because I had square footage. I wanted to know what we're looking at.
Yeah, so the classrooms in this one, or core learning area, is about 750 square feet. And this was a starting point for discussion with the
So
team.
basically down about 150 square feet
That's
from
correct.
our average classroom
That's
size
correct.
now. Okay.
And so I
thank
want to
you.
clarify too, what's important to know is that if you take a typical 900 square foot classroom, which Browns Point typically is,
Right.
and you take out the casework that's in there, the usable space is about 750 square feet.
Mhm.
So because we're going to more mobile storage and mobile furnishings, you're actually getting the same kind of usable space, but even increasing the amount of space you have because of the spilling out areas. So even though it's smaller footprint, less built-in casework, less wasted space.
And then one of the teachers are going to ask you where's storage, because everybody always
Correct.
needs storage.
Yes.
That's correct, and yeah, that's one of the tricks with the design evolution with this is looking for creative ways to deal with storage, and so finding spaces in the shared area for storage of things that aren't used day to day, don't need to be in the classroom, could be in a storage room, could be in storage that's out in the shared area, could be modular storage solutions that are more flexible and more adaptable than the fixed storage that we have that takes up that 150 square feet in the rooms now. Also, that 750 square feet, works really well for the large group learning areas. But as we looked at that, the different activities that could happen and spill out into the shared areas that could be visible from the classroom, could the space in between the classrooms, each of those 4 teachers in this diagram is now pooling their 150 square feet each into a larger, more usable area that groups can spread further out and find their individual spaces. What we heard is that each student, each group ends up finding, they might like a little nook and cranny, they might like a large table to spread out into. So this gives them more opportunity, more option to find other types
So-
of areas.
So you're looking at about 100 kids in those 4 units during the day,
Correct.
averaging 25.
Yep.
Is there enough room for them to move around without bumping into each other? You know what I'm getting at?
There is, one of the things that that this type of model starts to require, and what we've been talking to the advisory committee and the staff about, is it does require collaboration. And
Right.
so if you have 4 individual classrooms at 900 square feet each, and each teacher owns their own space, they can operate in their space. A space like this gives some more opportunities for, say, like art and science in a large space, but does require some cooperation between teachers to manage the scheduling of those spaces as well.
And that speaks to, again, hearing what the teacher said. At Mary Lyon, it was, we need neighborhoods. At Browns Point, it was, we have to collaborate. So hearing that drives how you create some of these spaces to make sure they're getting.
But
what they
saying
need.
it and doing it
Yeah.
is 2 different things, and that's a
Mhm.
concern that frankly I have
Mhm.
as we move forward in this, and that's going to be on the principals and our instruction teams to, it's sort of like we build it, but maybe they aren't going to come to the idea of what they have to do. I'm not being negative about that, but it is a concern because I've seen schools in the past that we designed, Lister, for example, and those collaborative spaces were not used. But it's a different world now, 15 years from when that school was done. So I like the concept, but we're going to have to help our teachers a whole bunch to get used to doing this.
It's been an interesting process working through
bet.
this. When we first started, what we kept hearing was we like our large classrooms, and
Right.
and we want to hang on to that idea. So we knew starting out that we had a conversation to get to, and
Good.
kind of working through the process as we have. Really, what we started to look at is, well, for this learning suite you're looking at, I think the number is right. It was about 4,300 square feet that was assigned between all of the different room sizes and circulation space and everything. And how we look at it, and I think the design advisory team and the teachers are starting to understand, is that we're actually giving them a lot more space than they have currently. It just looks different, and of course it's much more flexible. And so it's been an interesting process, but I think they're getting there to understand that it's going to be a lot more space to work with, much more
I
flexible.
think once they see it, they will,
Yeah,
when
but
it's done.
it's been an interesting conversation.
Catherine?
Just a kind of a follow-up to this. I mean, conceptually, to me, if I suddenly had to share the storage that I have to work with my team, and we have shared space too, and of course I'm not a teacher, it would be very, very difficult to do. I mean, so I just want to ask clearly: did our teachers ask for this shared space, and are they prepared to deal with sharing that storage space versus owning their own bit?
Yeah, from the beginning, we went on tours from the very, right at the outset of the project, and we saw several different projects that had different models of this shared space, and it was an interesting process as we went through and saw different ones. One of the ones that was really compelling to the entire group was Wilkes Elementary in Bainbridge, that they saw from a number of different aspects were really interesting to them. One really surprising thing that we heard there was that in the beginning there was a lot of transparency in that building, and what they really liked was that all of a sudden they saw how that space could be used, that it was easily accessible to the outdoors, and all of a sudden kind of expanded their minds to beyond what's in the classroom, but now all of a sudden I have this space outside the classroom, I have a space even outside of that to the exterior that could be so much more useful than the classroom itself. And so there is an evolving discussion on what the storage looks like, in this entire area. And I know we're running short on
It's
time.
okay.
here, so-
I think it's an important
I
question
think-
to address, and I wanted to add that when I
think
talked with...
Director Winskill had a comment.
Oh,
We
go
can
ahead.
Do that?
Yes.
Yeah, so we used to have 1,000 square feet per classroom. We reduced it to 800, and there was a big blowback, and we went back to 1,000. So I find this extremely alarming, and I don't think this is a good idea. And I don't think the shared space is a good idea. I look at some classrooms like kindergarten, first grade, they're not going to send their students out to work independently. It's just a different ballgame. So I find this a little bit alarming, actually.
I just want to make a comment. It's an anecdotal comment. My dad was an architect, and he designed the house that we grew up in. And my mother always complained about the size of the closets. And he said, well, you saw the plans. And her comment to him was, well, I couldn't read them. So keep that in mind as you move forward in what you do. And it was a family joke for forever. So just like a little thought in mind that not everyone knows how to visualize that space, and my mother didn't. So that was not enough storage kind of where you're at. So when you are working with staff and stuff, keep in mind that not all people do know how to read a plan, and not all people visualize in 3D as you do as architects. So that's just a
Right.
word
And
to the
to
wise.
your comment about the storage being in the classroom or not in the classroom,
Yeah.
what we found the teachers were pretty excited about, we're not taking all of it out, but to get a lot of the things that they don't use every day, hour by hour out of the classroom, they were excited about to have it nearby. So we kind of talked about three stages of storage. One being what you needed in the classroom every day, what needed to be nearby, and then what could be down the hall. For instance, there's in the diagram up there, there's a storage room over by the stair that you're seeing.
So if I may, so it's organic.
Yeah.
They're asking for it. They understand what's happening, and they want to see it happen. I just want to make sure that that's a clear line, and not
That's
sometimes
correct.
between what we think as designers and what people want can be different. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure that one's not
There's
blurred.
one anecdote to share.
Dr. Garcia wanted to make a comment. If I
I
could.
just wanted to stop us because I think there's two things at the table. One is I think we should let Anita talk a little bit about this concept because they're similar in both schools. And so we can get an educator, no offense, gentlemen, boots on the ground. You've already given her all the compliments. And the second piece is, Rob, I'd really like you to talk a little bit about the tension around what supports are provided to the staff on how to use the space once they move in there. So Anita,
Sure.
if you would just jump in and say,
Sure.
you know what, this is hogwash, or this is something that we came up with. One of the-
There's a little bit different that I don't know how Browns Point is addressing their support services, and as a Title I school, we're heavy support services. We have a title room, we have a lab room, and what we did, we had a conversation about we are done with the days of pulling kids away, and so we wanted to take that square footage that were those rooms and have that be our learning neighborhood where those staff would come into them. So yeah, kindergartners aren't out there by themselves, but they may be with title teachers out there working, 3 different classrooms, and they're gathered out there. There's small rooms adjacent to that for them to be out there. And those folks have small not classrooms, they're small working spaces that could take a group of 3 or 4 kids if needed be to assess or something like that. But we've leveraged that classroom footage to be our neighborhoods, and our classrooms are actually at 900 at Mary Lyon. Too many M schools.
Yeah.
But one of the things that Rob and I talked about, as we're moving into our swing year in 17-18, it's going to be essential, and I urge Rob to have, consider this with every building, that every building redoes their mission, vision, and belief, and comes to their community agreements about how they're going to teach and learn in those new spaces. Because we have a want to have transparency between classrooms and to have the services come to the child. But if we don't make some community agreements and say this is our practice and how we're going to share with each other and how we see teaching and learning happening in that space through our mission and vision document and that kind of transformation together, then we're going to walk into a new building with discomfort and be putting up construction paper to hide from each other. And we will be back where we started at 10 years ago. So that is a principal's job and a staff's job to really take advantage of that swing year and dive into what is it going to look like. What are we going to do when we walk in? What are going to be our guiding principles for how we use spaces and how we share? And that's a big piece of the work in the new buildings.
Cool. Thank you, Anita, for those comments, because I think that's been a concern, and if we can get our staffs to do that,
Yeah,
and
it's key.
So,
it is.
Rob, do you want to talk real briefly about how you guys have done that in the last couple of years?
Briefly is hard, but yes. So we have instructional facilitators. So Ryan Booth is one, and we have several others, and we're working on bringing more on board. And they go in to help our staff learn how to use the building, learn how to use the furnishings, the audiovisual. They're teachers, boots on the street, people who are coming in and learning about design and helping the teachers in those schools learn how to use the building. And so we've been doing that for the past couple of years, helping teachers look at the instructional framework, the 5Ds, and how does that apply to this new building. One of the things that we've offered too, and this is newer, is we realized that we kind of lived in a world of file cabinets and paper. And that's changed a lot. We still use paper, but we don't need all those files all the time. They're on our computers, they're in the cloud, wherever. And so we're starting to digitize documents and allow teachers to purge, and so they don't have as much of a need for storage. But we're still providing storage because we know they need it, but it's not all in one spot. It's the stuff they need day to day, like Brian said, that's going to be in their classroom, and maybe the stuff they use every 6 months goes in that common area. But also, we've done this year with McCarver being at McKinley and their swing year, to Anita's point, is we took the furnishings and put 6 classrooms and a library in there to have them test the waters for 6 months, and they gave feedback, and we listened carefully, and we made adjustments. And so I think there's, like Anita has said, this opportunity to be proactive in not just creating this new school and putting new furnishings in and AV and say, go. It's not that way. We're working ahead of time, talking with Marie and talking with Jennifer Troffler and making sure that what we're doing is in line with what's happening around teaching and learning, both at the central office level and at the building level.
So real quickly, approximately how long does an instructional facilitator stay with a new building?
For a year, and actually even a little bit beyond that.
Cool. That's good.
So it's one of the things that we've significantly changed to get to your attention is we can't just, the ongoing joke in my house is I can't visualize what the color of the paint looks like on the wall. So I'm one of those people that say, oh, that sounds great, until you get in there and you go, oh my gosh, it's horrible. And so it's really important, though, to listen to the people that are going to be using the buildings and not our vision and dreams of this. And so the educators are saying this. But then helping people that are teachers teach teachers how to use the facility to maximize the assets that are there. And so that's something that I don't think we've had a lot of time to explain, but one of the subtle things that we've done very intentionally in Tacoma to help our folks with our new buildings. Thank you.
We'll take a couple minutes to wrap up Browns Point and then move on to Mary Lyon. So I'm just going to take you to a couple of shots here, and I'm going to toggle on my keyboard here and take you to a website that actually gives you, why don't you talk about this, Brian?
Yeah, I think to your point, Karen, what we're starting to get into right now is some 3D visualization. Good. Because we definitely do recognize that seeing it in this way is a lot easier for people to understand what's going on. And we're just starting into this, and so we'll be exploring this with the group. But certainly the technology these days allows us to do this in a much more effective way, and to really immerse people into what the space feels like, and to change it pretty quickly, so they can see various versions. We've got 2 different versions built like this now, and we can pretty quickly and easily adapt these and show it to the group in successive meetings. So what this just shows is a couple different options that we've been looking at for what these learning suites might look like, helping the group to really understand what it is that they're getting, from storage to space to transparency and visibility through the space, and connection to the outdoors, and the ability to open classrooms up to the shared space, and
That's great.
sorts of different things.
Just one comment on Browns Point, and it's a compliment. I happened to be at an event where some of the older Browns Point citizens were there, and they had gone through other schools. They lived up in that neighborhood 50 years or so, and they were very appreciative of the fact that the district reached out for the first time and really talked to the community. So I just want to compliment you and on that. And haven't had that opportunity, so thank you for inclusion. And they said first time, and they'd gone through Meeker and all the schools up there, and as I say, 50-year residents, grandchildren, and so on. So thank you very much. Yeah, and you went out and sought it, and that's what's important. Thank you.
I should make mention of the project managers who are here tonight and sitting in the audience. Paul Popovich, who lives in the northeast Tacoma area, so he's a rock's throw away, I think, from Browns Point, and is working on that for us. And then Chris Anderson, who we hired this year, who's working on Mary Lyon, and also a Tacoma resident. Okay, there's lots more we could talk about. Maybe I'll just quickly say that we haven't completely decided on the site location for the school yet, because it's a huge site. We're in partnership with Metro Parks Tacoma, so there's a lot to consider. And so this first slide shows a possible location for the building. There's another possible location in the middle of the site, and then another one out to the southwest corner. So we're still talking about what's going to be best. We think there's an opportunity that white building in the middle could be saved, which is part of the old building, and could become a center of sorts. And we're not sure exactly what yet. Is it community center? Is it early learning? What could it be? But there are opportunities there to take advantage of a more campus-like feel. So we're still determining that. Mary Lyon is a little easier because it's a small site and we know where that is located. So, TCF, anything, closing words on?
Well, here's the floor plan, 2-story building. It's also a little bit in flux because we have 3 different site locations we're looking at, but we're getting close, and I think in the next couple of weeks we should know where the building's going and have the floor plan to go with it finalized. So the next time we come back, we'll be able to show you a little bit more about what the building looks like and so forth. We're getting there.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to Mary Lyon, and I'll turn it over to Dow IBI Group.
Okay, great. So this first slide is just to briefly talk about existing conditions. Mary Lyon is about a 2.9 acre site on A and 46th. It is one of the smaller sites in the district, so it's really important to us, both talking to students and teachers about how education is delivered, really looking at how we preserve play area on site, and then traffic and parking is a pretty significant issue for this school, with no current parking other than a few staff spots on the site. So new larger school, existing parking issue, and small play area to begin with, that we're trying to respect all of those things and maximize them all. So moving on to the next slide, neighborhoods, as I guess we've said a couple of times, the idea of teaching in neighborhoods, a collaborative process, was critical to Mary Lyon. There's a loop teaching method that's been very successful for them, so kids stay with a teacher for 2 years, and then there's a lot of partnering and collaboration going on. So supporting that has been a big part of the neighborhood design, and you'll see 6 classroom neighborhoods turned out to support the most variations of collaboration possible. So that's where we've ended up. And then, so talking through that, the Puget Sound theme, as I mentioned before, has been a way to connect students to the larger world, some awareness of what's possible out there. And then language is another theme that we're going to be weaving through the building, and you'll find that in all the neighborhoods. But today we'll just talk about the Puget Sound theme. So you'll see a couple of sketches here. Puget Sound is obviously the water connection to the ocean, but there's also the larger environment, the forest and the mountains beyond, with Mount Rainier being a key feature of that. So we'll be drawing that into the neighborhoods. These are just some quick sketches of how, in this case, how the library might work. The stairs to the library the vertical movement might relate to the Cascade Mountains in some way. And these are just some other images about, again, bringing those themes in, creating a place that a student tells their parents how great it is and wants to come to school every day, excited with imagery that relates to their thoughts, and then teaches them a little something at the same time.
And we've had conversations about how googly can we be, how playful.
Yeah.
Make you Google, googly. You know, having these places be where kids come and it's, wow, I get to go to school here. We want to create that awe and that wonder, and these are just great images that depict that.
And symbolism and that can be, they can directly tie to, directly understand, and then it builds a little further learning from beyond that. So this is a set of images about our neighborhoods. As I mentioned, a 6 classroom design with a shared area in the middle. The kind of smaller rooms that you see in a triangular shape there are the meeting rooms that Anita was talking about. So it's important here to bring services to the student instead of bring students to the service. So those are places that a ELL teacher can come, an OT teacher specialist can come and do exercises in those rooms, or they're also usable by the classrooms themselves in smaller groups. Talked about just finishing on the neighborhood briefly. The shared areas are intended as places where art and science are happening, so there's a lot of room to breathe around that, and a lot of work will be on display, so students are proud of what they're producing and have a place to put that up and kind of represent themselves in the neighborhood.
And just to touch on one point, we've had these Da Vinci, these maker spaces in the past. They're places we've gone to. And so similarly to computer labs, where we used to go to a place to compute, now we compute where we are. And so we're trying to move more towards the Da Vinci, a maker mentality, so that we can get messy in the classroom spaces or in the shared spaces and not have to go somewhere to do that. So creating more opportunity for hands-on kinesthetic learning experiences.
So the next set of slides are more the current status of the site and building. We're at a very important part of this, as we've said, is bringing the community in. The southwest corner is thought of as a plaza with some steps, so that's someplace the public should feel comfortable being and gathering, and can happen at the right times. It's also one of the kind of rituals of the Mary Lyon group is about safety, and it's about solving some of their traffic problem. Every student every morning and afternoon is handed directly from a parent to a teacher and vice versa. So to do that, they need a large place. For that to occur, this plaza in the right weather is intended to be a celebratory place. Right at current, they're doing that under the covered play in the rear of the building. It works functionally. It's not a kind of a celebrated a place to really respect this beautiful ritual. So that will happen in the plaza, and then the library moving through the building is intended to serve the same purpose on the inside as an open, kind of exciting experience. Just getting a little bit into the imagery, we're drawing on the sloped roofs of this residential neighborhood. This is a school. It will never feel like a two-story bedroom house, but we're intend to respect the character and the kind of themes of the neighborhood, and that's where some of that's coming from. And I think that's a kind of a good summary of the current exterior. You'll see some color on the neighborhood portions. Those are seating boxes that small groups of students can gather, be directly connected to the outside, and then again trying to bring back color and a playfulness that excites a student to be at school every day. The backside, again, the L shape of the scheme preserves as much site area as possible for play. The gym and cafeteria on the right there have strong connections directly to outside to a hardscape play area that can also double as seating for events, eating outside, this sort of thing. I think we've rendered it with too many planters there, but there'll be a significant hardscape play area, then blending out further into the site into the soft areas, so the field and grass areas. And then this is just a walk around to kind of get an idea of the character.
How much play space is going to be left?
It's slightly bigger than Washington's.
Okay.
Yeah, so they will have a turf play field. It's not a, it's not a high school sized official.
No,
right?
my grandson will be starting preschooler in 2018,
wonderful.
and the younger one the next year. So
Right.
They live on 40th and A. So this is a school that I'm keeping track of.
You bet.
You know what I
Okay.
mean? And, as my
No
son.
pressure.
Yeah.
What? Why didn't he?
No
Said
pressure.
no pressure.
No pressure. Yeah, you're on notice. Okay,
Yeah.
but no, seriously, I
Yeah.
know that's a problem, and and we do have kids that want to run around, and it's a tight space. It's a little bigger than Washington, is it not? Space for the
The
site
overall
wise.
site is about the same.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Are they about the same? Pretty close.
It's just a little bit bigger than Washington.
Yeah.
Washington, 1.9.
I mean, the building is beautiful. The elevations. I mean, it's going to be an amazing addition to that neighborhood, and pleased with that.
Actually, I have a question about the height variance
Yeah.
from what we have now and what it is
Yeah.
going to be,
3
because
stories.
that might certainly surprise the neighborhood that's
Yeah.
not changed for many, many years.
Yeah, one of the things that was taken into consideration is where is that highest point of the building? And is
Yeah,
it gonna,
where is
so what they, and maybe you can speak to that, Jeremy, just about siting.
Well, sure. The L shape is intended to respect the neighbors. There are residences on the site. If you go back to the site plan, at the north side, there's a row of 4 or 5 houses there. So we're
Mhm.
intending to pull most of the height as far away from that as we can, and be on 46th Street.
Is that down along the bottom there?
Yes.
That's
so
right here, yeah.
To the
Oops.
bottom is the
Oops,
south.
sorry.
Is 46th Street.
Oh, yeah, for goodness sake.
Um,
Sorry.
So there's definitely an intent to respect the neighborhood, balance that with preserving play area, which leads to the L shape and a 3-story scheme. And, if you can imagine, if we took one of those stories and put it on the site somewhere, we're suddenly losing a significant amount of play area.
Sure, but just to be clear, I'm asking about the height variance. We're talking about a 60-foot difference then from the existing building at the highest part of the building? 'Cause there's 2 additional floors? I don't know.
Right now,
We
we're
are-
talking about 45 feet.
It's 45
45
feet.
feet
in-
more?
Which-
No, 45 feet
Total.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's
Total,
well
and
within-
that's the code
Yeah.
limit.
Yeah, it's well within
Okay.
the, yeah.
So
You
Yeah.
didn't have to get a variance.
Okay, so yes, it will, the current building is, feels like about 2 stories. It will certainly be a story taller than that. It's within the height limit for the neighborhood.
We had talked about 2 and 3 story building, and it came down to how can we maximize the field play space for kids? How can we keep the neighborhoods close to grade level banding because they're looping? And so there was a lot of discussion about which way do we go? Do we go 2? Do we go 3? And we'd settled on 3 in order to
Yeah.
accommodate all of those conversations.
I also think they did a great job in
I
the
do
areas that
too.
you come to the building, you mostly come to a 2-story building. So
Yeah,
it's only
you
on the
do.
playground around the backside. Most of the edges are soft and broken down to a smaller scale. So it'll help that transition feel.
Some of the addition, I think, was 1 story that was added later. You know, that's got mishmash, as you know, and I think, you know, from what my son tells me, and he's kind of an activist, he's gotten speed bumps now on,
Yeah.
down there on 40th and A and what have you,
Hey,
but.
speed bumps tomorrow the mayor.
I mean,
Yeah,
I get-
I know,
would-
but seriously about, you said the neighbors and Buddy are really excited because it's starting to turn around neighborhood and they're now getting younger families and kids like my son and daughter-in-law and my 2 little grandsons, a year and old and, you know, 16 months and 3 months. So they'll be back to back in kindergarten and first, and so they're looking forward to it.
Would it be helpful
Nice job.
for us to, we traditionally do a number of community outreach opportunities, but
I think it
to
would be
call
good.
that out, to say
Mhm.
what's different is this will be a 3-story building so that people are not surprised. Is that one of your areas?
I think that would be a good idea.
I think that's probably a good idea. I mean, just
I
that's
agree.
a older neighborhood with a lot of people those new families coming in. There are a lot of people that have been there for a long time. I think we have very goodwill in that community, and I would want to make sure that we
Yeah.
keep it, particularly when we're working really hard to improve it with this building and not otherwise, right?
So you might want to
Agree.
consider.
I mean, we have had a number of open houses, and the
Yeah.
public has been invited and there to, you know, to the extent possible. I would definitely say it's worth talking to them.
Might
Is
do
there
it.
some way that you're doing specific outreach to that residence
They do.
immediately adjacent? Whether
Every-
it's mail or
everyone-
anything else?
Yeah, everyone
not
has
just-
received a flyer to, you know, I wouldn't say everyone attended all of those.
Oh, I'm sure they
meetings.
didn't, but
So we will,
Okay.
Leisha and I will work on a plan with the design team to see what would be a good outreach and maybe multiple outreaches. Maybe it's flyers, maybe it's an opportunity to
Yeah.
take some of the current designs and stand in the supermarket in a booth and talk to people for a day. But we'll figure out something that makes sense and definitely do that.
We've also, on the past couple projects, created 4-foot by 8-foot vinyl banners and put them on the fence with renderings when we get to the point where we're able to share.
That's a good idea.
Saying, thank you, voters, thank you for your support,
Yeah.
here's what's happening, here's the timeline. So I would encourage, and you know, we're one of the only districts I know of that has brought in a PIO person, a public interface person, to help with the communicating and the messaging through all the different outlets we have. And so bringing that right to the fence line of the property so that the neighbors directly adjacent to each of these sites can see what's happening. We'll be working on all those initiatives.
okay. The Enact meeting is probably a good place too.
It is.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, we've been to ENAC, yeah.
With
and
this
we'll
plan?
go back again.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
we-
also just a neighborhood
Excellent.
canvas like you did with the flyers. I know my son said, well, you didn't tell me there was gonna be an open house. I said, I didn't know.
Yeah.
But, you know, that was, but,
Yeah.
you know, and my daughter-in-law was able to go. He was working, but,
Cool.
good.
What I'm
So,
hearing though is really important to call out is the difference in height
Mhm.
between the current. So sometimes you can just take a simple layover of the height in the front versus what the neighbors will see. And that's what I'm hearing the board really want to explicitly call out from what they've seen so
Okay.
that people are not surprised
Yeah, we can do that.
when that's there.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
we're at the end of our time, and if there are other questions, the takeaways that I wanted to leave with you today is our current designs are supporting and enhancing our best instructional practice reflected in the 5Ds. And the other takeaway was our current designs also support our 4 strategic goals. Not all of our strategic goals are part of the presentation, but they kind of came out. I heard safety. We're always talking about safety in our design. Browns Point, it came out especially because they've got 2 schools that they're living in right now, and so safety was of primary concern from staff and parents. Partnerships, we're creating those spaces that can be used by the community after hours, and we're excited about the opportunities there could be there. early learning is a given. We are talking about preschool opportunities at each of these buildings, and so that's in there as well, and our academic excellence related back to the 5 Ds. So what questions
Okay, more
or comments
questions,
are there out there?
I have a comment and a question. I like the idea of us continuing to add diversity to our portfolio of options, and I see, just as when Steve was on the dark side designing Geiger, you built this school for Montessori. You didn't build a school and then say, great, teach Montessori in there. So to me, it feels very similar as we talk about the pedagogy that's going to go into the instruction. So my question is, and I like that, my question is more for Dr. Garcia, what are we going to do through professional development and recruitment to ensure the continuity of that sort of instruction? So we've got a dynamic principal and an engaged staff, and they're committed to this building. How do we continue that year over year? If we lose a principal, if we lose staff, is there a plan right now? Have you thought about how we ensure that continuity?
Yeah, and actually your nationally recognized superintendent of the year led the process through what was Section 83 and it's now Section 82, which really it takes each building and has them design their vision and mission and have to re-clarify that on an annual yearly basis. And the staff have to articulate how they've helped move that mission and vision. And so through the efforts of recruitment and what we're doing here in the Tacoma Public Schools, we're realizing that that match is so critical. So we allow staff to self-displace if they don't value the vision and mission, or they're saying, look, this isn't the portfolio that I want to be in, so where can we match them? So we're doing those aspects of that. As far as the professional development goes, not only does the planning and construction team provide a instructional facilitator to work inside the building, but Marie's team makes sure that each of our instructional facilitators or instructional coaches are being trained on what is the best pedagogy to use. How do you apply that back, for example, in Mary Lyon, based on your individual school improvement plan and those. And so there are core principles that are universal across the board. And so just similar to what we have in that book over there from the instructional side, learning happens in patterns. So this next generation thing that we were presented, that's all fantastic, but most of that has to do with the tools that kids are engaged with. Mm-hmm. The brain still learns through patterns. And it's the educator's job is to create the patterns for the kids using the tools of today and not the tools that I may have learned with. And so it is an ongoing, evolving conversation, even down to how do buildings take their professional development time, which is a shift in Tacoma, and use that as individual buildings to plan. And then under your leadership, providing us waiver days every 9 weeks to look at their data allows the teams to action plan to say, based on our data, our kids are now, what are we need to do differently to reach these kids? Those are just a few of the examples.
Thank you.
Good answer. Debbie?
I don't have anything further.
Catherine?
No, nothing more.
Final comment from me, outstanding job. Really appreciate what you guys have done, the community outreach, the looking at making us leading edge schools. You know, what I want in the school district is, and I think everyone does, is to be leading edge in everything we do, from polishing floors to educating our kids, that whatever we do it the best. And I see that in the processes and where we are and where we're going. And I'm confident that the buildings will accommodate 21st century learning, and we will, and with the designs that we're doing now, really following those guiding principles. Because I wondered when our book came out whether we actually would do that at a point, if we would go away from it, because for you as architects, it's a paradigm shift too. And I know that quite well, to engage in this process, and we've done it with the schools that are already under design, what we see here, what we see at Arlington. So I just commend you. I'm still going to ask questions and keep you on your toes, and it's our job. But
Thank you.
Thank you, and I feel comfortable with where we are personally moving ahead, and we look forward to when you're coming back to us with what we really see the final designs. Great.
So as a staff, we'd ask that, obviously this is the first chance you've got to see it. So if you walk away tonight and you have major heartburn, we ask that you communicate with the board president and the board vice president so there can be a discussion. And that probably realistically needs to happen within the next 2 weeks. And if there's no major burning heartburns, then the teams will continue to move forward. I'll challenge our teams to give our boards regular updates as the designs go, both through the Friday report, reminders through the website, and then invite you to be a part of our board meetings so that those that are watching at home. And so we love information. We love to see the progress as they go. And then just continue your great work about reaching out to our communities. That's very critical, and keeping them very informed of where we are in our progress.
One other thing, came to my attention that Assistant Superintendent Nolan now needs to be addressed as Dr. Nolan, completed her doctorate. Congratulations. I know she said I don't need to be recognized. Yes, you do. Okay.
We're all very proud.
Yes, we are. If there's nothing further, anything else? Okay, we are adjourned. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Great.
Thank you, Anita.